A difficult day. For 5 full days, the sun had not risen over the icy sheets spread across the frozen land of Eiland. However, this did not matter much, as the people of that land were used to the long absence of light during this harsh season. They carried on with their days no matter how deep the darkness became, and they did not wait much for the sun. It was enough for the storms to calm a little and for the snow to melt beneath their feet for them to say joyfully, "Summer has finally arrived." But Ella knew that summer was still far away. That morning, the snow had piled up unusually thick against the walls of the small cabin, and the strong whistling wind woke her from her sleep, making her jump up in alarm. She looked around the cabin, but found no trace of her father. She quickly got up, shivering from the bitter cold. As she approached the fire, which was about to go out, she realized that her father had left the cabin very early. She put on the thick fur coat he had made for her with his own hands, tightened the belt around her waist, and then pushed the cabin door open to the outside. The first thing Ella noticed was that arc carved into the snow in front of the entrance, sharp-edged, as if it had been drawn in haste. She immediately recognized that her father had left it, as he always placed small marks to guide her if he had to go out. But this arc seemed deeper than usual, as if the force with which it had been made was telling her that something unusual had happened. She raised her gaze toward the vast, white expanse, where the 4 dogs stood, harnessed to the small wooden sled. A thin layer of snow covered their backs, while more had gathered on the front of the sled, falling softly during the night. She approached them and brushed the snow off their heads one by one, then sat at the front of the sled and let out a short whistle. At once, the dogs surged forward powerfully, carving their path through the soft snow, leaving behind a long trail like a white line stretching across that wide landscape. Ella followed the trail with her eyes, searching among the whiteness for any sign that might lead her to her father. The air was cold, stinging her face, and the snow swirled before her with every gust of wind, yet she continued on without hesitation. She knew she had to reach him before the storm grew stronger. The sled sped along its path in a silence that filled the vast emptiness, until something dark caught her eye on the snow. She stopped the dogs and got down to examine it. It was a piece of dark wood, a piece she recognized well. It was part of the wooden torch her father always carried. She picked it up carefully and felt the lingering warmth beneath the snow, realizing that her father had been there only moments before. Ella returned to the sled and tightened the ropes in her hands, as if gathering her courage once more. At that moment, the image of her gentle mother flashed in her mind, placing her hands on her shoulders. On those cold nights, she wished she could feel that warmth again, even just once. She could not clearly remember her mother's voice, but she had never forgotten the warmth of her hands and her smile, which resembled a gentle light in the darkness. She took a deep breath, then whistled to the dogs to continue the journey. As the sled moved forward toward the forest, the land grew wilder. The trees rose gradually on both sides, then became denser until the path seemed like a narrow passage leading into an unknown world. Suddenly, the dogs stopped all at once, then tilted their ears forward in alertness, as if they had caught a faint sound among the tree trunks. Ella held tightly to the edge of the sled as she stared ahead with tension. Then, among the trees, a huge gray shape appeared, moving slowly, as if carving its way with difficulty through the snow. She could not make out its features clearly, but the low growl it emitted was enough to make the dogs step back in fear. Ella raised her hand gently to calm them and encouraged them to move forward cautiously. The sled advanced slowly until it reached the edge of a small valley. The dogs slowed down without making a sound. Ella leaned forward and noticed that the surface of the snow was no longer smooth as before. Instead, it carried 2 completely different tracks, one light, resembling human footsteps, and the other deeper and wider, as if something massive had slid over it. The 2 tracks ran side by side for a short distance, then disappeared where the snow began to slope down toward the bottom of the valley. Ella got down and carefully examined the tracks with her hands. They were still fresh. The snow around them had not yet frozen again. At that moment, one of the dogs raised its head toward the east, As if it were sniffing, catching a familiar scent, Ella hurried back to the sled, grabbed the reins in her hands, and set off across the snow in that direction. After a few minutes, a thin trail of smoke appeared rising between the white rocks. The sled pushed faster through the snow until she reached a small cabin almost hidden beneath it, with only the roof and the black chimney visible. Ella jumped down from the sled and carefully pushed the door before rushing inside. Her father was there, sitting near a weak fire, clearly exhausted. His coat was covered with layers of snow, and his right leg was wrapped in icy bandages, its ends stiffened. On his sleeve were thin threads of fur, and drops of blood had dried on the leather, as if something had torn it along the way. The moment he saw her, a faint smile spread across his face, as though all his fatigue had vanished from his chest at that instant. Ella rushed to him and sat beside him, then took out the piece of wood from the torch she had found and placed it in his hand. He took a deep breath, as if regaining his strength after the hardship of the journey. The dogs, meanwhile, had curled up near the fire seeking warmth, while snow continued to fall slowly behind the window. Ella rested her head on her father's shoulder. She felt his heartbeat begin to calm gradually, and she found her own peace after the long journey. He did not tell her what had happened, nor did she ask about what she had seen. In that quiet moment, silence was more eloquent and deeper than any words.